be okay.
Good evening, everyone. I called the October 13th meeting of the Penns Manor Board of Education to order. Welcome to everyone here and viewing via YouTube. Mrs. Peterson, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton? Here. Mr. Rainey?
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode? Here. Mr. Hardesty?
Here.
Mr. Larch?
Here.
Mr. Polenick?
Here. Here.
Mrs. Williams? Here. Mrs. Tate? Here. Mrs. Smiley?
Here.
I'm here. Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mrs. Dolges? Here. Mrs. Seglin? Here. Mr. Grimaldi?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. Gramling?
Here.
Mrs. Dolby? Here. Mr. Safran?
Here. Thank you. Mrs. Williams, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any presentations?
None this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you kindly. We need to amend the agenda to add the name of on 20N Candace Brink as the proposed instructional assistant. So may we have a motion to amend our agenda to insert into item 20N Candace Brink for the 2.0 hour instructional assistant position.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second it.
Any questions or concerns? We'll do by voice vote. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. So now we'll need to approve the amended agenda. May we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Again, we'll do a voice vote. Yays. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, no. Motion carried.
I just have one point of order. We need to show on our official minutes why we amended the agenda this evening. And I believe that's because the interviews just occurred today. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the minutes should reflect that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sanford. Mrs. Peterson, who do we have to address the board this evening?
We have a few. Mrs. Crawley. She is from 18 Staff Street, Howard, and she wants to talk about agenda items 20P and 20Q.
Excellent. Okay. So I was hoping we were going to amend the agenda a little bit for the wording on that but I had sent out an email to everyone earlier about that, but not seem to get done. But we will still address this. So I appreciate the effort and service this board puts into our district. In regards to Mr. Hardesty's, this is according to agenda 20.P. In regards to Mr. Hardesty's behavior on September 9th, there needs to be a yes vote to agenda item 20P. The recorded session had been viewed on several social media platforms, tens of thousands of times, tens of thousands, not even joking. Students cannot shout swear words or other vulgarity without disciplinary action. Overall, Mr. Hardesty's word choice and actions are a poor representation of leadership within our district that should have consequences. Agenda item 20Q. While we've been on this topic of masks in our schools for 6 weeks now, we are hoping that tonight we will meet in the middle by allowing masks to be optional with parental consent. We are asking this board to disregard the recommendation from the PA Department of Education frequently asked questions of having medical only exceptions. The mask order allows for exceptions under section 3. This section does not specify doctor-only exceptions. We ask that you vote yes to parental consent for an exception allowing the option of wearing or not wearing a facial covering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Susan Flowers from 1710 South Harmony Road in Penryn.
Hi, I'm a foster parent of a third grader in the district here, and my husband and I would like to thank the board and tell you that we fully support the board. And I think you, I watched the video, I think you showed remarkable restraint at the last meeting. I'm trying to raise this child with a sense of community, empathy, and compassion. I fully support the mask mandate. I think it's a very small thing that we can do to show that we care for people who are more vulnerable, who may be immunocompromised, and otherwise need to be protected. I am a registered nurse, 35 years in critical care. I retired 3 months into COVID. Our healthcare personnel are exhausted. We've lost about 30% of the nursing staff at the hospital. It's filled with agency people. They're traumatized. And once again, I think it's a small thing that we can do just to show our support for the healthcare community that's taking care of us to wear a mask. I don't think it's burdensome for the children. Children have been through over history a lot more, and I think it's a very small sacrifice to ask of them. And I guess just closing, today on the news, it said that Penns Manor Elementary School had like the lowest ranking in the county, so I think there's better things that we can do with our time than to keep rehashing something that has been decided and that is the law. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Sean Schwartz from Penryn.
You want to keep the flow of the other going, it's up to you. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Wanted to kind of backtrack to the last meeting. You had mentioned about the cross-country course and the work that parents and some alumni had done. And, I wanted to thank the recognition of that for all of our work. But I also kind of wanted to get some feedback from the board that you will now maybe take that back on board as part of the regular maintenance from the school district as it used to be. What happened, for those of you who have not been on the board long enough to know the history, I'll just give you a quick rundown. That when that property was timbered, the cross-country course was basically destroyed, and it was supposed to be put back. It was, part of the deal with the logging, and it never happened. And so we went ahead, put it back so the kids had somewhere decent to run again. There were some issues with running along the road and so forth that was causing some safety concerns. And I would just hope that we can now maintain what we've tried to get back for you. So I guess it's more to Mr. Larch, Mr. Dole, as much as anybody, that you guys can, moving forward in the budget for the next year, add that in and work it as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Amanda Frampton from 1030 Sage Street, Clymer.
I'm also here for 20P and 20Q. I'm asking that you vote yes to both of those. Regards to Mr. Hardesty, it was viewed over and over again, and the kids were making fun of it in the hallway. So there needs to be some kind of accountability for adults too, for our actions. So I ask that you vote yes. And then also, it's the same thing. I would ask that I have a choice in my own children's health to based on their emotional state, things that have happened. My one son just can't, he was so excited about this school year. He can't stand it now. He can't breathe. If there needs to be consistencies in the wearing of the mask breaks, there is not consistency. They're getting yelled at for different things. So I just think it needs to be up to the parents if they wear them or not. So I'm asking you as a board to please vote yes on 20Q. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frampton.
Okay, up next is Chris Cameron from 1335 Route 403 Highway North.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the time to speak this evening. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Mr. Larch for hearing us last week and getting both 20P and 20Q added to tonight's agenda. So thank you for that support. We've came several times and, didn't seem to get anywhere. So that was much appreciated. The point I want to make this evening about the mask that I think I don't want to reiterate too much here, but it's much greater than the mask itself. That is the current issue right now. As parents, you are not allowing us to have a choice. That's what's happened. Now, we all know about the mandates. We all know about everything that the governor has pushed on us. But it really comes down to the simple fact. Is Penns Manor School District going to allow someone in Harrisburg, Tom Wolf, who is totally detached from what we are here at Penns Manor, doesn't care about Penns Manor, doesn't care about the kids, doesn't care about the families? We've seen that through his other actions through this pandemic as evidence as to where he would stand in his concern about our district. So will we allow ourselves to be bullied by a tyrant in Harrisburg? Or will Penns Manor School District stand up for personal freedom, for families' rights to make decisions? Will we stand up and we may think it's silly to say this is an historic night. Well, I think it is. I think history could be made here if Penns Manor says no. We were elected officials by parents of this district. We are going to make decisions for our district. We are not going to be dictated to. We are not going to be bullied, and we are going to allow parents to decide what is best for their children. That's what needs to happen this evening. So I pray that all of you can take a moment and think about that. Think about the idea of choice before it's some other thing that then we have no choice on. What are we going to do? We need to stand up. We need to do what's right and allow parents to make that decision for their own children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron.
That is all I have.
All right, thank you all. May we have a motion to approve the minutes as printed? Any questions, concerns, corrections? All right, need a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Jill.
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say yay.
Yeah.
Opposed, nay. Number 7, business report. May we have a motion to approve the financial reports as printed?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Large.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Questions or concerns? A roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic, Mr. Polenic,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrose,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion carries.
Thank you. Presentations of bills. I would like to move to authorize payment of the bills as presented. General Fund for 2021, 2022, $227,731.92. Nothing from Capital Reserve and Cafeteria Fund for the 2021, 2022 year, $30,176.74. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion carries.
Thank you. Program updates, Mr. Johnston.
We have none this evening, Mr. Hartson.
Thank you. Number 10A, the superintendent's report. Mr. Johnston, please.
Sure. Before I begin, I do want to welcome Mr. Rainey to the table. Appreciate you stepping up and be willing to come to the board. Look forward to working with you. So thank you for joining us. Also want to introduce Mrs. Dolby, our special ed supervisor. We had hired her a few months back, but she was being held by the previous school district that she worked at. So Mrs. Dolby has been with us for a couple of weeks now. So I just want to put face to name so everyone knows Mrs. Dolby. And again, she's special ed supervisor, meaning that she will be supervising all of our students with IEPs, GIEPs, and our 504 plans, along with any of the faculty and staff that has to do with our special education department. So welcome, Mrs. Dolby. Also this evening, PSBA is recognizing board members who has reached milestones in their service. The first step of recognition is anyone that has served for 8 years. So this evening, on behalf of PSBA, I want to recognize Mr. Polenick as he enters into November and December, finishing up 8 years of service to the district. So Mr. Polenick, I want to thank you on behalf of the administration and faculty and staff for your contributions to the board. And I will make sure that you get your certificate from PSBA. Again, thank you for your service. Once every 4 years after that 8-year mark that Mr. Polenick has obtained, certificates are distributed. When a board member has served for 24 years, then they're recognized with a plaque from PSBA. So again, I want to recognize and thank Mr. Polenick for his service. Want to remind you a couple of items down through the agenda. So let me review that real quickly with you. Under budget and finance this evening, we have a motion to approve extra math agreement for $512. That's a site license for our elementary students to obtain online math extra services. Under athletic committee this evening, we're asking for you to approve Mr. Riley as the girls basketball assistant coach 1. Also to hire head baseball coach, and that would be Mr. Corvina. Also asking you to hire girls track and field assistant coach 1, which is Ms. Felco as the recommendation. Also to hire junior high girls volleyball assistant coach retroactive, Mrs. Smith. Also asking you to approve some sports volunteers that's listed on your agenda, and also to accept the resignation from our girls basketball assistant coach 2, and that is from Mr. Malozer. Going down under new business, we're asking you to accept the resignation of Mr. Muscatello as our business manager and board secretary. And as the board does a search, we're asking you to approve 20B to appoint Mrs. Peterson as our interim business manager. Also asking you to approve the senior class trip. Again, this is an individual item because it's out of state. That is why it's an individual agenda item this evening. Also asking you to approve guest teachers, substitutes this evening, along with a leave request from a member of PMEA. Also an FMLA request from a support staff member. We also have 2 teachers that we're asking you to approve their raise in the pay scale according to the contract. Also asking you to approve the hire of 2 instructional assistants this evening. First is Tina Janosko, and then a second is Krista Gillo. Also, this evening, we're also asking you to hire 2 long-term subs for 2 approved long-term leaves. One is for our learning support in the primary, which is Mrs. Busavicki. Also to approve Mrs. Hudak as our phys ed and health long-term sub. Also this evening, asking, as we have amended the agenda, to approve hiring Candace Brink as a 2-hour instructional assistant from now to at least January mid-year. Also asking you to approve a settle agreement that we have discussed in executive session at the prior meeting. And then we have the 2 requests from our citizens, 20P and 20Q, for your consideration for approval. Also want to remind everyone that our next comprehensive strategic planning meeting is a week from tonight, October 21st at 6:30 p.m. in this room. Also, just to let the board know, Buildings and Grounds Committee on Monday at 6:30. We're going to be meeting with Eric from McClure. He is actually going to be presenting, well, he has presented the measurements and verification report from our energy savings project that we've gone through. And we just need to hear that presentation, answer any questions of any of you that, or any Buildings and Grounds Committee member, so that I can sign off on that report. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
D, the high school activity account, be sure to check it out in your folder, and we have no updates on federal programs of public relations. Any old business, Mr. Johnston?
We have not.
All right, thank you. Negotiations Committee, anything, Mrs. Eckenrode?
Nothing this evening, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you kindly.
You're welcome.
Curriculum, Mrs. Williams?
Nothing tonight, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you very much. Budget and Finance, we have approved extra math agreement. I move to approve an agreement with Extra Math in the amount of $512.50 to provide online access for extra math services to our students. We have a second?
I'll second.
Nate? Any questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Tate, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Polenic, Chairman. Do you have anything tonight, sir?
Nothing to report tonight, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you very much. Athletic Committee,
Oh, I have a few
you
things.
you look like you all been busy.
Yeah, we have a few things tonight, Mr. Hardesty. Athletic Committee, 16A, hire junior high girls basketball assistant coach 1. I'd like to make the motion to hire Mr. Mike Riley as the girls junior high assistant coach 1, pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $3,051.33 as per the collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 to July 31st, 2022.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mr. Rainey, motion carried.
Okay, 16B, hire boys head basketball coach. I'd like to make the motion to hire Mr. Eric Carvana as the boys head baseball coach, pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $4,223.03 as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 to July 31st, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Let's have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carried.
Okay, 16C, hire girls track and field assistant coach 1. I'd like to make the motion to hire Miss Anna Falco as the girls track and field assistant coach 1, pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $3,051.33 as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 to July 31st, 2022.
I'll second it.
Thank you. questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polanic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carried.
Okay, 16B, hire junior high girls volleyball assistant coach 2. I'd like to make the motion to hire Mrs. Lauren Smith as the junior high girls volleyball assistant coach 2, effective September 14th, 2022, pending all clearances and required training at a salary of $1,576.35, as per the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association, dated August 1st, 2019 to July 31st, 2022.
I'll second.
Few questions or concerns? Mrs. Peterson, roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polanic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
Okay, 16E, approve winter sports volunteers. I'd like to make the motion to approve the following sports volunteers for the 2021-22 school year, pending the receipt of all current clearances, cardio and impact testing, and the coaching education courses as required by PIAA. Boys basketball, Jason Hill, Garrett Grimaldi. Girls basketball, Megan Schwartz, Maddie Weaver, Chad Kazumchek, and Rebecca Stower.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Do a roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polanic,
yeah,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Dalton, motion carries.
Okay, 16F, accept the resignation of junior high girls basketball assistant coach 2. I'd like to make the motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Jason Meloser as the junior high girls basketball assistant coach 2, and to grant the administration permission to post and advertise for this position.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polanic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes,
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mr. Rainey, motion carries.
and that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Larch. Transportation Committee, Mrs. Tate, chairperson.
Yes, I have one item tonight. 17A, approved drivers for 2021-22 school year. I'd like to make the motion to approve the following bus drivers and substitutes for Tri-County Transportation for the 2021-22 school year. Carolyn Long, Mary Rummel, Susanna Penny.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polanic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
That's all I have tonight, Mr. Hardesty.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything under 18 policies, Mr. Johnston?
There are none. Mr. Hardesty.
Correspondence?
There's none there either.
Okay, well, let's go on to new business. 20A, accept the resignation of Mr. Muscatello as the business manager and board secretary. I'd like to make the motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Joshua Muscatello from his position as business manager and board secretary effective October the 10th, 2021, and to grant the administration permission to post and advertise for the business manager position.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Larch. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mr. Larch. Motion carries.
I'd like to make the, 20B, appointment interim business manager. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Mrs. Nicole Peterson as interim business manager effective October 11th, 2021, at the prorated annual salary of $65,000 per year with the same fringe benefits she is currently receiving, to serve until such time as the district hires a business manager.
Second.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion carries.
20C, approved senior class trip. May we have a motion to approve the senior class trip to Washington DC, Baltimore, Maryland, and Kings Dominion from May 23rd, 2022 to May 24th, 2022, contingent upon the senior class's ability to secure lodging, ticketing, and transportation arrangements that allow for a 30-day free refund policy in the event that the senior class is unable to travel due to school closure, state or federal mandates, administrative or school board directives, or other factors that prevents the senior class from traveling.
I'll
Motion.
make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mr. Rainey. Motion carries.
Thank you. 20D, approved guest teacher for the 2021-2022 school year. May we have a motion to approve the following guest teacher for the 2021-2022 school year pending completion of Aaron IU guest teacher requirements, all paperwork and clearances. Candace Brink, Jennifer Rowley, Noel Jenkins.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you all. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
Thank you. 20E, approved substitute for the 2021-2022 school year. May we have a motion to approve the following day-to-day substitutes pending receipt of all current clearances for the 2021-22 school year. Candace Brink, support staff substitute. Carrie Schilling, support staff substitute. Paul Repick Sr., support staff substitute. And Ruth Turano, English as a second language.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the request of employee number 898 for leave under Article 9, unpaid leaves of absence, Section A of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association, dated August 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2022, with the effective date of or on about December the 8th, 2021, provided, however, that such unpaid leave shall not exceed 12 months as provided for under Article 9, Section A of the CBA. The leave may consist of paid and unpaid leave consistent with the terms of the CBA.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Larch. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mr. Larch. Motion carries.
20G, approve FMLA request for employee number 80. May we have a motion to approve the request of employee 80 for leave under the provisions of Article 12, unpaid leaves of absence, Section 5, family and medical leave of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Support Professionals, that's the CBA, and the provisions of the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993, FMLA, and subject to the terms of the FMLA and the current CBA for a period of time not to exceed 12 work weeks. The effective date of this leave is September the 17th, 2021.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Questions, concerns? Let's have a roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Dalton. Motion carries.
Thank you. 20H, advance Mrs. Horwath on pay scale. May we have a motion to advance Mrs. Carly Horwath on the pay scale from the level of bachelor's degree plus 20, step A, to master's degree, step A, of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1, 2019 through July 31, 2022. The annual salary of this step is $59,683 and will be effective October 15th, 2021. Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Jill?
I'll second.
Franny? Questions, concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mr. Rainey. Motion carries.
20I, advance Mrs. Brody on pay scale. May we have a motion to advance Mrs. Angela Brody on the pay scale from the level of bachelor's degree plus 20, step 4, to master's degree plus 20, step 4 of the current collective bargaining agreement between the Penns Manor Area School District and the Penns Manor Education Association dated August 1st, 2019 through July 31, 2022. The annual salary of this step is $67,551 and will be effective October the 15th.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mr. Dalton, or Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Tate, second by Mrs. Williams, motion carries.
Thank you. 20J, hire instructional assistant. May we have a motion to hire Tina Janosco as a $7.58 an hour.
7.58 hours.
Excuse me, as a 7.58 hour a day instructional assistant, effective October 15th, 2021, at the contracted rate of $9 per hour for the first 60 days, 6 work days, for the first 60 work days, and $10.60 per hour thereafter, as per the contract between the district and the Penns Manor Area Education Support Association, dated July 1st, 2020 through June 20th, 2024.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Larch.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Smiley, motion carries.
20K, hire instructional assistant. May we have a motion to hire Krista Gillo as a 7.58 hour a day instructional assistant, effective November 1st, 2021, at the contracted rate of $9 per hour for the first 60 work days and $10.60 per hour thereafter, as per the current contract between the district and the Penns Manor Area Education Support Association, dated July 1, 2020 through July 30, 2024.
Motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Rainey, second by Mrs. Dalton. Wow. Motion carries.
Thank you. Number 20L, hire long-term substitute. I'd like to make a motion to hire Mrs. Tina Busavicki as a long-term substitute elementary special education teacher, effective on or about October 21, 2021, to fill the vacancy which was created by a board-approved leave, and further to approve the compensation in accordance with the district's policy at a rate of $100 per day for the first 20 consecutive days worked in that position, and with the remainder of the days worked in that position to be compensated at a daily rate of $135.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenick,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Okay, motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Eckenrode, motion carries.
Yes, sir.
We have one point of order. I just realized on that particular motion and on 20M, there was a sentence to be added indicating that the term would not exceed 90 work days, as we always put with regard to our long-term subs. So we need to amend that last motion to include that sentence.
Not to extend.
Yeah, this position will not exceed 90 workdays. I believe that's what we.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we should put the term of this position shall not exceed 90 workdays.
So do we need to redo this?
Yes.
Okay. Can I add it at the end of the statement? It's right there, okay. We're going to redo 20L, hire long-term substitute. May we have a motion to hire Mrs. Tina Busavicki as a long-term substitute elementary special ed teacher effective on or about October 21st, 2021 to fill the vacancy which was created by a board-approved leave and further to approve the compensation in accordance with the district's policy at a rate of $100 per day for the first 20 consecutive days worked in that position, and with the remainder of the days worked in that position to be compensated at a daily rate of $135. The term of this position will not exceed 90 workdays.
We should add also that this motion will supersede the prior motion regarding this position.
This motion will supersede
The prior motion.
the prior motion
Regarding this position.
regarding this position. All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Any other questions or concerns? Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by
Yeah,
Mrs.
that's
Tate,
fine.
second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion carries.
This position shall not exceed 90 work. Is that other part you wanted?
You don't need that. for this one.
Okay, we haven't done it. Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Number 20M, long-term substitute. I'd like to make the motion to hire Mrs. Rebecca Hudak as a long-term physical education teacher effective on or about the 8th of October 2021 to fill the vacancy which was created by a board-approved leave and further to approve the compensation in accordance with the district's policy at a rate of $100 per day for the first 20 consecutive days worked in that position, and with the remainder of the days worked in that position to be compensated at a daily rate of $135. The term of this position will not exceed 90 workdays.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Questions, concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion carries.
20N, hire 2-hour instructional assistant. May I have a motion to hire Candace Brink as the 2.00 hour a day instructional assistant effective October 15th, 2021 through January 20th, 2022 at the starting instructional rate of $10.60 per hour as per the current contract between the district and the Penns Manor Area Education Support Association dated July 1, 2020 through July 30, 2024.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Thank you, Debbie. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
Okay, 20-0. Or excuse me, 20-0, approved settlement agreement. May we have a motion to approve the settlement agreement and release regarding student number XXXXX89768 and to authorize the administration to prepare any and all documents necessary to effectuate the implementation of the terms and conditions thereof.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Dalton, second by Mr. Rainey. Motion carries.
Thank you. 20P, petition requesting board president to relinquish his office of president. May we have a motion for Mr. Hardesty to relinquish his office of president due to his conduct at the September 9th, 2021 business meeting as requested by the following district citizens in the form of petition submitted to the Board School of Directors on October 7th, 2021. Nicole Scherer of Harwood, Riceland Costello of Penryn, Matthew Costello of Penryn, Chris Cameron of Northern Cambria, Jason Bowman of Strongstown, Matthew Lapso of Clymer, Jennifer Lapso of Clymer, Casey Crawley of Harwood, Randy Crawley of Harwood, Tara Lieb of Harwood, Craig Lieb of Harwood, and Amanda Frampton of Clymer.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir. Need a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Under questions or concerns? I will be abstaining from voting as I appreciate the consideration that each of y'all, you board members, have given the situation, and I will abide by your wishes. May we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Smiley,
No.
Mr. Rainey,
No.
Mr. Polenic,
yes,
Mrs. Williams,
No.
Mrs. Tate,
No.
Mrs. Dalton,
No.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
No.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion does not carry.
Thank you. 20Q, petition requesting the board to allow parental consent for students to wear or not wear a face covering while in the Penns Manor Area School District school buildings. May we have a motion to not comply with the Pennsylvania Acting Secretary of Health's order, which requires the wearing of face coverings of individuals while inside the district school buildings and provide parental consent for students to wear or not wear a face covering while inside of the district school buildings as requested by the following district citizens in the form of petition submitted to the Board of School Directors on October 7th, 2021. Nicole Scherer of Harwood, Bryceland Costello of Penryn, Matthew Costello of Penryn, Chris Cameron of Northern Cambria, Jason Bowman of Strongstown, Matthew Lapso of Clymer, Jennifer Lapso of Clymer, Casey Crowley of Harwood, Randy Crowley of Harwood, Tara Lieb of Harwood, Craig Lieb of Harwood, and Amanda Frampton of Clymer. May we have a motion?
Can I have a question on that?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain why this wasn't written the way the petition was?
Would I have to defer to you, sir?
Well, My understanding is that based upon the petition and the comments that were made by the citizens here tonight, some of whom signed, and maybe all of them signed the petition, the request was that the board would not follow the recommendation of the Department of Education regarding the determination of whether or not to grant an exemption for medical reasons as set forth in the Acting Secretary of Department of Health's order. And if you look at that closely, what the district would be doing or has done in the recommendation of the Department of Education is that when a request for an exemption was made or would be made, the district would use the same protocol it would use for determining whether or not a 504 plan should be implemented for a student. And that's based upon typically some medical recommendation from a doctor indicating that the student has a certain condition or situation and requires some accommodations from the school district. They're not eligible perhaps for special education services, but the student does need some accommodation. And that's the protocol that the district would be using in this case. My understanding is that we're being asked to not do that and simply receive a consent from a parent saying that they don't want their student to have to wear a mask. And if you look at that in its plain face, it's saying then there's an option. And quite frankly, if you look at the order from the Department of Health, there is no option. It's a mandate that all people in the school building wear a mask, students, employees, visitors, etc., unless they fit one of those exemptions. And so this is written this way because if we were to grant options merely based upon a parental waiver or parental consent, then we would not be complying with the Department of Health's order. And moreover, we would not be complying with our own health and safety plan that specifically says with regard to wearing a mask, we will follow the recommendations of the Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the CDC. And that's basically, not basically, that is what we're doing now. The reason that the board never voted on whether or not to follow the order is because in our health and safety plan specifically says we'll do that, and that's what we're doing. But that's why this was written this way, because by us granting what these petitioners want, we would be violating the order of the Department of Health and our own health and safety.
Okay. So if this would pass, what would that do?
If this would pass, it would mean that we're, number one, we're not in compliance with the order. And up to this point, that order still stands. As you're aware, it's been challenged in several court cases. Those cases are proceeding through the normal judicial process. But we've had at least 2 cases where the courts have not granted a temporary order. And just so you understand, when somebody applies for an injunction, they typically apply for what's called a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction on the basis that if that's not granted, they're going to be harmed pending that case actually getting before the court. And as you're aware, the courts have denied granting that temporary restraining order. So what they'll do in the future, once they have a full hearing, they may grant an injunction. We don't know. But right now, I think it's indicative of where the courts are leaning, at least, in that they did not grant the TROs.
Okay, so if this would pass then, okay, if this would pass, then what we're saying is we're going to follow the order as a school district, but the parents would have a right to consent for the students to wear or not to wear face covering? Is that what we're saying?
That's what you're saying.
Okay, okay. So in other words, if this would pass, we're saying the school district is gonna follow what we're mandated to do, and we're following our safety.
No,
plan.
don't misunderstand.
Okay, I
that.
misunderstood. That's,
If we were to adopt this and
Mhm.
say that the parents can simply give their consent to have a student not wear a mask,
Mhm.
we are then not in compliance with the Department of Health order, and we are not in compliance with our own health and safety.
Okay. but they would be able to do that though.
They would be able to do that.
Okay, very good. Thank you, thank you.
Any other questions among the board members? Okay, we still need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second? Have a second?
I'll second it for the purpose of holding a vote.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
No.
Mr. Rainey,
No.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
No.
Mrs. Tate,
No.
Mrs. Dalton,
No.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
No.
Mr. Hardesty,
No?
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Larch, second by Mrs. Eckenrode. Motion does not carry.
20F, student recognition. We wish to congratulate the PMEA Student of the Month for September, Juliana Shank, and the PMEA Student of the Month for October, Kirsten McCatchin. We congratulate these students. We wish them the best in their future endeavors. 21, request for field trips or conferences. May we have a motion to approve the field trips and conferences that are in your packet?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Thank you both. Questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty.
Yes.
Motion by Mrs. Eckenrode, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion carries.
Our upcoming scheduled meetings are our workshop or committee meeting on November the 4th in this room at 7 p.m. And the business meeting is in question because it's on Veterans Day.
Keep it on. As I emailed to all of you, that business meeting falls on Thursday, November 11th, Veterans Day, with schools closed. Totally up to you if you want to conduct the meeting or you don't. That's why I left it blank.
Personally, I prefer not to have it on Veterans Day. I just think we need to spend that time honoring our veterans personally. But that's just me. Prefer to do it on the 10th if we could, if that's possible or not.
Or
So-
what we've done is if we don't do it on that, we do it the following week. But it's up to you. You can set any date.
If you have it on the 11th, I'll be here. I just prefer not to have it that day.
We couldn't have it like the day before.
The 10th?
Can we do that?
Sure.
10th, Wednesday?
I'm in the 10th.
That's fine.
Okay, on the 10th?
We'll have to have a motion, correct, Mr. Saffron, since we're changing.
We need a motion to amend the agenda to add a motion to change our voting meeting of November 11th to November 10th at 7 o'clock.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion to
Amend the agenda.
amend the agenda to add a motion to change our November business meeting from November 11th, Veterans Day, to November the 10th at 7 p.m. in the district boardroom. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Questions or concerns? Need a voice, or I mean a roll call? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Tate. Motion carries.
We have nothing,
Now you need to adopt the motion.
oh, that was just the agenda. All right. I would like to make the motion to change the November 11th, 2021 business meeting to November the 10th, 2021 at 7 PM in the district boardroom. May we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any questions concerning the new motion? All in favor, say aye. No, I'm sorry. Roll call.
Mrs. Smiley,
Yes.
Mr. Rainey,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Hardesty, second by Mrs. Williams. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Rainey, for reminding us of that. We have nothing planned for executive session, so if nothing further brought before these board members, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.